Do you know who is she? The Black Widow of mountaineering. With her striking beauty, men would go to extreme lengths, sometimes risking their lives, to be near her. She was often called a master manipulator, leveraging her charisma to climb the world's highest peaks. Her public image sparked non-stop debate, but let's go back to the beginning. Chantal was born in France near the Alps and began winter sports as a child. She first loved alpine skiing, but eventually transitioned to mountaineering. Once she earned her mountain guiding certification, she tackled some of France's toughest routes. At 22, she placed third in an ice climbing competition against 25 of Europe's top climbers. She was the only woman. Her talent attracted significant attention. She joined the French National Mountaineering Association, and her first expedition above 5,000 meters took her to the Andes, where she summited 3 peaks over 6,000 meters. One impressed mountaineer later invited her to join a 1991 Everest expedition, a dream come true for any climber. In her diary, Chantal once wrote that climbing felt like pedaling uphill with no engine. She didn't reach Everest's summit that time, but afterward she vowed only to go after 8,000-meter peaks, alpine style. No supplemental oxygen and minimal gear. She was known for acclimating quickly, often outperforming male climbers at high altitude.
Moi j'adore rencontrer les gens de par le monde, mais y a pas besoin en fait d'aller forcément très loin pour rencontrer des gens. Bon là il y a des aventuriers, mais il n'y a pas que des aventuriers, hein. Il y a aussi des gens derrière les caméras, il y a des gens dans les bistrots, il y a des gens partout.
She was well liked at base camps, but critics claimed she used her allure to manipulate men and stir drama. On her second Everest attempt in 1991, tempers flared among climbers. Some even got into a fistfight because of her presence. Amid this chaos, American climber Thor Kieser fell for her. They began a relationship and planned to climb Argentina's Mount Fitzroy, but money was tight. To save funds, Chantal guided tourists on other climbs. Just before departure, she told Thor she didn't have enough for a plane ticket. Determined to be with her, Thor took on extra work. They flew to Argentina together, but during the expedition found cracks in their relationship. They failed to summit, and their romance faltered. Journalist Jennifer Jordan later revealed that Chantal presented Thor with an ultimatum before another push. Summiting that day would fix their relationship. He didn't fully understand, but took it seriously. He led their way, correcting Chantal's errors, driven to succeed. By 11 p.m., Thor was stuck on a difficult section near the summit, soaked and exhausted. He persevered, grabbed a ledge, and the rock shifted beneath him. In an instant, he was yanked off the wall. As he plummeted, he thought, "At least I'm alive." After a 20-meter plunge, bouncing over rocks, he landed on a ledge, injured but breathing. His eyelid was torn, and his right arm was broken in several places. Fellow climbers rushed to his aid and helped lower him back to base camp. Thor's summit dream was over, but Chantal wasn't done. She told Thor she'd try again the next morning with a new team. Before parting, she told him, "I don't love you anymore." Thor returned home heartbroken and saw a psychologist who urged him to stay away. He ignored the advice. When he learned Chantal was joining a K2 expedition, Thor signed on to a Russian-American team that included top climbers like Ed Viesturs and Scott Fisher, along with Vladimir Bali-Berdin, the first Soviet to summit Everest. Meanwhile, Chantal joined a Swiss team heading to a route in Pakistan, a country with strict customs. Unconcerned, she broke local norms, walking alone, wearing short shorts, actions that caused tension. 19 days later, she arrived at K2's base camp, ready for the climb. They aimed to summit alpine style, meaning no shared effort setting fixed ropes. Still, others noticed the Swiss team using ropes set by others, which eased their ascent. Chantal, refusing to carry heavy packs, let male teammates haul her gear. She enjoyed the attention. Her bag was small and light, but that was just one tactic. Many thought the Swiss team was underprepared. When she realized this, she broke Pakistani law by secretly switching to the Soviet American team. Supposed to leave with her original group, she stayed behind instead. She accepted Thor's invitation to join his team. While Thor handled rope fixing, gear, and base camp prep, Chantal began a romantic relationship with climbing partner Ed Viesturs. On July 28th, Kieser, Viesturs, and Neil Beidelman left base camp for the climb. By July 30th, they reached Camp 3, while climbers Vladimir Baliberden and Gennady Kopejka were about 300 meters ahead. Viesturs and Beidelman shared a tent. Thor took another. That night, Thor heard footsteps. It was Chantal. After others left the camp, she quietly followed them upward. During the climb, Viesturs and Beidelman worried about the weather and chose to descend, while Chantal, Thor, and Alexei pushed on. On July 31st, skies were clear. Thor carried heavy gear, a tent, stove, sleeping bag, food, and ropes. Eventually, they left much behind: sleeping bags, ropes, food, to lighten the load. But nightfall struck, and they had to stop. Thor got frostbite on his feet, while Chantal, wearing a thin jumpsuit, seemed unaffected and handled the altitude well. After a brutally cold night, Thor decided to descend to retrieve more gear and their sleeping bags. Chantal asked him to bring hers too and stayed at camp. Thor met climber Alexei Nikiforov on the way down, who helped him. They didn't make it to Camp 4 that night and ended up camping on the slopes. They resumed climbing the next morning. On August 2nd, the main group reached Camp 4, where they met Baliberdin and Kopejka, who had submitted via the Abruzzi Spur, a first since 1986. After an exhausting night at 8,600 meters, they left a tent and sleeping bag for Alexei and hurried down. The summit push continued. Thor started before sunrise, forging a trail through half a meter of snow with Alexei behind. But just 200 meters from the top, Thor realized he was too drained to safely summit and return. He had burned all his energy trail breaking. Jennifer Jordan described the moment. Thor sat there, scanning below for Chantal and Alexei. He wanted to hand off leadership. They were distant. He tried to cry but couldn't. Then he heard a voice in his head. "If you want to live, go down." He looked around. No one was there. He rose and began descending. Chantal lagged behind last, catching Alexei at the bottleneck. She passed him and ran into Thor. "Thor, come with me. We can summit together," she urged. He refused. Exhausted, she told him, "Whatever happens, you're a good person." He agreed to wait for her at Camp 4. His decision to retreat ultimately saved all three: Thor, Chantal, and Alexei. On his descent, Thor discovered 50 meters of discarded rope. He anchored it into the ice and installed a makeshift handrail through the dangerous bottleneck, ensuring Chantal and Alexei could descend safely. Meanwhile, Chantal, lightly loaded and superbly acclimatized, carried minimal equipment. On August 3rd, 1992, at 5 p.m., she became only the fourth woman to summit K2, a massive achievement on one of the world's toughest technical climbs, nicknamed the Savage Mountain. But her joy was short-lived. Along the way, she lost her sunglasses, leaving her eyes vulnerable to cold, airborne ice particles and intense UV rays, which can literally burn eyes in minutes at that altitude. By the time she reached the top, she'd gone blind and couldn't descend without help. She crawled into a snow cave dug by Baliberdin 2 days earlier and began freezing. Alone and sightless, she couldn't find her way down. Spending another night at that altitude could have killed her. Then, the unexpected. Alexei, descending after her, found her in the cave. He helped pull her up, and they started going down together. Chantal, blind and frostbitten in hands and feet, kept nodding off. Alexei had to keep prodding her awake. Thor's preset rope helped guide them. When Alexei attached to it, one crampon slipped loose, causing him to fall several meters. Before the rope arrested him, he collapsed into Thor's tent, nearly dead from altitude sickness, fatigue, and cold. "Where's Chantal?" Thor asked. "She was right behind me," Alexei whispered. Then, about 45 minutes later, Thor heard crunching snow and unsteady footsteps. Chantal, hands out in front, childlike, limped down the slope. Thor dragged her into the tent, removed her boots, and saw her feet were severely frostbitten but still salvageable. He whipped up tea, soup, and offered them chocolate. They stayed at Camp 4, above the death zone, for 3 days. Thor realized survival was running out. At that altitude, rest does not heal. You still die slowly. He needed not only to save himself but also Chantal and Alexei. The next afternoon, they began the descent. Thor and Alexei supported Chantal under her arms. She could barely walk. They'd carry her a few meters, then pause to rest, repeating this over and over. In 3 hours, they only managed to cover 60 meters. Concerned that proceeding downhill at night could be lethal, Thor decided to set up a tent in place. Chantal stayed put in the snow. Alexei, focused on survival, opted to continue descending, leaving Chantal's rescue up to Thor. Inside the tent, Thor and Chantal prepared to spend another night over 8,000 meters. The next day brought clear skies. Thor radioed Viesturs and Fisher at Camp 3. They reported Alexei had reached them the night before, ready to climb up and help with Chantal. As they ascended, Viesturs and Fisher spotted avalanche danger and anchored themselves with rope. Near camp, Viesturs got an eerie feeling. His instincts warned of imminent snowsliding. He dug a snow hole for shelter. Fisher, confused, watched. Suddenly, a massive wave of ice and snow swept down the slope, carrying Fisher away. Viesturs heard the cracking sound just as the avalanche hit. He dived into his holes, but the rope yanked him out like a fish on a line, dragging him hundreds of meters downhill. He jammed his ice axe into the ice to stop his fall, finally grabbing onto a rock face. Both climbers dangled precariously just meters from a cliff, but were uninjured. They kept climbing to rescue Chantal. Thor carefully lowered her down via the rope. After a few hours, he and Chantal met Viestur and Fisher, but Chantal was completely spent. Viestur knelt before her, grabbed his backpack, and offered eye drops. He raised her glasses and saw her eyes, swollen and red. Together, the four continued descending to Camp 3. 2 more days later, they reached Camp 1. By the end of the descent, Chantal was steady enough to walk on her own. Viesturs, ever the safety-conscious climber, admitted K2 was the only time he broke his rule. In her K2 memoirs, Chantal barely mentioned her exhaustion, just that her eyes hurt. Instead, she dwelt on the warm reception from base camp. Charlie brought me tea and cookies, and I collapsed into his arms. The Mexican celebrated me warmly, but she didn't mention Thor Kaiser in her writings. When she returned to France, she was hailed as a hero, but she owed a fine for climbing without permission, which she simply tore up and left behind in Pakistan. Gennady Kopejka later downplayed Thor's role in her rescue, calling him an unnamed American who turned back. Kopejka credited Alexei Nikiforov as the main rescuer until others arrived. Alexei added that Chantal hadn't actually submitted. She'd misjudged her strength, but was still credited for the ascent. After Polish climber Wanda Rutkiewicz died on K2, Chantal became the only woman to return alive from its peak. She was celebrated in France, but her relationship with Thor ended. Among climbers, she remained controversial. Critics claim she used men to advance her climbing career, ignoring their safety, which earned her the Black Widow label. But mountaineer Daniel Mazur saw it differently. Chantal was unlike the big commercial, heavily Sherpa-supported climbers. She genuinely loved the mountains. The ones who whispered behind her back often had romantic motives. Sure, she leveraged her looks, but she was a fighter. She wasn't always happy. She had a sore knee and wasn't always fit, but she was tough. She sometimes pushed too hard. Her contentious K2 climb landed her sponsorships, enabling her to return to Everest in spring 1993 with a New Zealand team. Even with 9 climbers and 8 Sherpas, she insisted on moving faster and alone, upsetting some teammates. She reached 8,400 meters, but her slow pace and light clothing forced her to turn back to prevent frostbite. Later that year, she returned with a Spanish team, but this time only climbed to 8,000 meters without proper permits. She and Sherpa Pemba attempted Shishapangma and Cho Oyu illegally, summiting both in October. Back in Kathmandu, she was fined again but skipped payment, complaining about Himalayan red tape. Next, she traveled to Antarctica's Mount William, where a documentary was made about her. Then she returned to Everest to attempt the unclimbed Northeast Ridge. By this time, she had become well known and joined Russell Bryce's expedition as a paying client. But danger from avalanches and sheer exhaustion forced her to retreat. In 1995, she tried Everest again. With Rob Hall's expedition via the Southeast Ridge, she reached the South Summit at 8,750 meters, but had to turn back. She was the group's slowest climber. When Rob put his hand on her shoulder at the South Summit, urging her to turn around, Chantal, lips blue, eyes unfocused, silently nodded. A few dozen meters down, she collapsed and blacked out, realizing she couldn't continue without help. Several climbers, Ed Viesturs among them, helped carry her down. They got her to first aid tents, and she recovered quickly. By the next day, she was walking around base camp as if nothing happened. Rob was furious. He said he'd pulled her down like a sack of potatoes and banned her from ever joining his team again. Chantal was seen as someone who frequently required rescue, putting others in danger. She was once again labeled the Black Widow. Many climbers lost scroll lead to summit attempts while saving her, some risking their lives. Thor Kaiser later said, Chantal didn't care about her own safety. I climbed with her because I loved her, not because it was smart. She was like a modern Helen of Troy. Her polarizing impact on climbers was enormous. In 1994, the French magazine Vertical observed, the problem with Chantal is that her climbs seemed so effortless that we didn't take them seriously. After Alison Hargreaves died on K2, Chantal remarked, I admire her, but there's one difference. I'm still alive. After 6 unsuccessful Everest attempts, Chantal shifted her aim to Lhotse, the only major 8,000-meter peak not yet submitted by a woman. In 1996, she joined a U.S. team for Lhotse. As they neared the top, a hurricane and blizzard hit, forcing everyone but Chantal to turn back. Chantal claimed to reach the summit, the first woman to do so. But there was no proof. She'd climbed solo, without witnesses or summit photos, explaining her camera had frozen and she descended quickly. Her claim was widely questioned. That same day, gravity struck. Rob Hall and Scott Fisher died on Everest, while Chantal claimed to summit Lhotse alone. After Lhotse, she climbed Manaslu, earning the French media's title of modern-day greatest female climber. Thor Kaiser recalled she had a magnetic charm that drew men in. She'd joke, too many men, too little time. Former lovers would approach longing in their eyes, and she'd flash them a blank smile and say, oh, sorry, do I know you? In a final twist in 1998, while attempting Dhaulagiri, Chantal was climbing with friend Ang Chering Sherpa, more companion than guide. They camped at Camp 2 near an Italian team, and Franco Brunello warned her about a dangerous crevasse. She thanked him and went to the tent with Chering. That was the last time anyone saw them alive. The Italian group waited out a snowstorm, later seeing the tent half buried but didn't check inside. After the storm cleared, they dug her out to find Chantal and Chering dead in their sleeping bags. Chantal had a broken neck and jaw. Chering appeared to have suffocated. Many were baffled. She didn't die climbing, but in her tent at base camp. Some suspect an ice mass fell on top of her, but no one saw it. A complete mystery. After her death, her body was returned to France for cremation. She'd left a detailed funeral plan, including special requests. Her recorded laughter to play at the service. Her last wish, to have her ashes scattered across multiple locations, hasn't fully been honored. This enigmatic ending only deepens her puzzling legacy. The uncertainty around her death and her unusual final requests underscore the paradox of a climber who both enchanted and challenged the mountaineering world.
Lhotse! What is the name?